Okay, so before we formally start our class, so I would like to let you know that the chapter quiz is already posted and you have until, I think I put there until Thursday to finish that. And if I'm not mistaken, our chapter one ends also today. I'm not sure if I put there 5 o'clock in the afternoon. So as of now, you should have at least do your stuff. Okay, and we're going to finish chapter two today. So I would suggest that you already start out chapter two, and you might have another quiz that you're going to do with Respondus for chapter two. Okay.
So
So,
chapter one assessment on OWL, we have to do that today?
yep, the deadline is today, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay.
Okay. So I also like you to look at the blackboard because there are some stuff there that's going to be useful to you. So if you're going to look at the documents there, so there's a section there that says recorded lecture slides. So these are just additional problems that you have. And as you could see here, you have not even visited this thing. So if you open that material that you have there, these are problems that you have by chapter. So I would suggest you start doing that thing also. So if I'm going to show it to you,
Is
you
is
might,
this something you recently added? I'm sorry.
no, it was there. The one that is recently the others is the black, the one in the Zoom for the Zoom. But this is always in the Blackboard. So if you open it like this, okay, so all you need to do, you go to the slideshow and then current slide. And then
Okay,
you will see,
so
you
let's
will
go to
hear
some
the
problems
sound.
in chapter 1. So the first problem that we have has something to do.
So I leave it up to you to do the thing. Because by now you should be starting to prepare for the exam. If you're going to wait everything in the last minute, your grade may also be a last minute grade.
I have
Okay,
a question.
sure.
When could we ask you questions about the quiz?
Maybe later when we're
Okay,
done.
thank you.
Okay. So we're going to continue chapter two. So we started chapter two with the different atomic theories. Okay, from the Greek time when Democritus proposed the concept of atomos, and then we go to John Dalton's atomic theory, and then After John Dalton, we have Thomson, what we call plum pudding model, where he says that the electrons are like the raisins in the pudding. Okay, and then we stop with Ernest Rutherford nuclear model, where the massive mass is found in the center that we call the nucleus. And during that time, we just identified the positive charged particle, which is the proton. And then James Chadwick identified the neutron, which has the same mass as the proton, but has no charge, unlike the proton and the electron. And then we also did some calculation with regards to the average atomic mass that can be found in your periodic table. So we're going to start this session with the periodic table. So right now, that's the thing that you have with you, periodic table. So how did it come to how it looked like at this time? So the story of the periodic table started way back when the elements already exist. And the first one who tried to do it is not even Mendeleev. Okay? So there were a time that it is compared to a triads because there are three elements that they have the same properties. And the middle element is usually the average of the lowest and highest molecular atomic mass element. And then there was a time that it was compared to the musical notes as the octaves, because they said the eighth element repeats in terms of the property just like the musical notes. But it took in 1869 when Dmitri Mendeleev discovered that the known elements were arranged in order of, this is not atomic number, this should be atomic mass. They could be placed in horizontal rows such that the elements in the vertical column had similar properties. Okay? And the tabular arrangement of the elements in rows and columns highlighting the regular repetition of properties of the element is called periodic table. So when you say periodic, it's just like a time period. So the periodicity that they have here is in terms of properties. Okay, so just like the season that we have, okay, the winter, spring, summer, or fall. So what Mendeleev observed is there's a repetitions of the physical properties among these elements. Now, during that time, there's also another scientist who's doing the same type of things. His name is Lothar Meyer from Germany. Okay. Now, why did Mendeleev get the credit? So Lothar Meyer also do the same thing, arrange the periodic table according to atomic mass. But Mendeleev got the credit because what Mendeleev is he predicted the existence of some elements that is not known yet during that time. How did he predict? He predicted the properties of these elements. Okay. And when he found out the properties of this element, which is here, their properties is the same as the one predicted by Mendeleev, the gallium and the germanium. Okay. So what Mendeleev said is it exists, it's not yet discovered. But if it's discovered, these are its properties. So that became the basis of the periodic table and how the credit was given to Mendeleev. But as I have told you, if you're going to look at the periodic table, there is an issue there between this element and this. Because if it's according to the atomic mass, okay, iodine has a lower atomic mass compared to the tellurium. Okay. Now, the one who picks the present periodic table came in First World War. Okay, so from atomic mass, it was arranged now in terms of atomic number. And what can you say about that? Okay, they were able to say that they really follow, okay, what Mendeleev did in the periodic table. And the credit goes to, okay, a young guy by the name of Henry Moseley. I don't know if you heard the name already, okay. Unfortunately, Henry Moseley passed away during the First World War. So it could have contributed more if he survived the war. So the present periodic table that we have is based on the atomic number, and that fixed the problem that we have here. Okay. So why did Mendeleev put the iodine after the tellurium, even though the iodine has a lower atomic mass? So the main reason there, if you put it this way, the iodine properties is consistent with the properties observed in the given group. So that's the main reason why Mendeleev make that arrangement. So the present periodic table that we have is what we call credit to Henry Moseley. Okay, so if we're going to look at the periodic table, so we have the term periods and groups. Okay, so if we have this period, this is consists of the element in one horizontal row in the periodic table. So this is the one that goes from left to right. That's the period. Now, a group, on the other, is consists of the elements in only one column of the periodic table. So that's the one that is top to bottom. Okay, so we could say first period, second period, third period, and then here, group 1, group 2, maybe we could say A, 1A, 2A. So the groups are usually numbered as A or either B groups. Okay, so for you to understand what I'm talking about, let's look at the periodic table. So this is the period that we have that goes from left to right. And this is the group. Okay, so we have a group. This is consists of the elements in any one column of the periodic table. And the groups are usually numbered. So you see there A, and then you have the B groups. Okay, so the A group that we have here, that is your main group. Or the way that they call the main group, that is the representative element. Now the big groups on the other hand here, okay, we call them the transition element or transition metals because all of them are metals. Okay, now there are still 2 rows here. So where does this came from? So if you're going to follow the 57 and then it goes to 58 there, and then 89 and then it goes to 90 there. So you call them the inner transition elements. So this is the periodic table that we have at this time. Okay, so if we're going to look at each of the group, okay, this is what the names that we have, but you don't need to memorize them. Okay, so you have the alkali metals, so that's the first group, and then you have the alkaline earth metals, that's the second group, and then you have the boron family, the carbon family, okay, the nitrogen family, and then you have the chalcogens, the halogens, and the noble gases. So each of these groups, usually they have the same properties. Okay, alkali metals are known to be the most reactive group. Okay, noble gases, they are the most unreactive group. Okay, the halogens, they always give a negative charge. The chalcogens usually a negative 2 charge. So alkaline metal will give you always a positive 1 charge. Alkaline earth metals will always give you a positive 2 charge. Now, what do you need to know about this periodic table? So if you're given the periodic table, okay, so in addition to this group, this is the metal group, the whole thing here. But in addition to that, okay, you should be able to tell if you're given the periodic table, where is the metal, where is the non-metal, and where is the metalloids. Okay, so when we define metal, this is just a substance of mixture that has the following properties or characteristics. Luster, okay, like gold, silver, good conductor of heat and electricity, the one that we use in a kitchen, aluminum, the one that we use in electricity, copper. It is malleable, which can means that you can hammer it into a sheet, and then ductile, which means you can draw it into a wire. Okay, and all of the metals are on this side, the blue one here, except the hydrogen. So everything here are what we say the metals. Now, non-metal, on the other hand, these are the elements that does not exhibit the metal property or the metallic property. So it dulls in color. It's a poor conductor of heat and electricity and brittle, and usually they are the one here. Some of them are not even solid. Okay, if you're going to look here, the 7 here, they are all what? You see there the shape of the 7, they are all gases. Or sometimes the one that you have here. Okay, now the element in between them, the one in the boundary, they can exhibit both the metal and the non-metal properties. Okay, and you call them metalloids. In other what we call book, they are known as the semi-metals. Now you may ask me, why do we need to know if it's a metal or a non-metal? Okay, because the definition of the molecular and ionic substances depends on what's the composition. Okay, because today, this morning, what we're going to do is we're just going to write formulas and name compounds. So there are rules that you need to follow, and the rules depends on either you have a molecular substance or ionic substance. So if you're going to deal with this molecular formula of a substance, this is a notation using atomic symbol with subscript to convey the relative proportion of the atoms of the different element in a substance. So if you have a chemical formula, it gives you information. And usually it has a subscript. Okay? So consider the formula aluminum oxide. So this formula implies that the compound is composed of 2 aluminum atoms and 3 oxygen atoms. So that's the information that you can get. And the chemical formula is one way for you to know if you have what? An element or a compound. So which one here is an element, which one is a compound? What can you say about C and then small o?
Element?
Element.
That is an element. And it is different with C and O, which is more capital, and that is a
Compound.
compound. So if you're fan of writing everything in capital letters, you're going to be screwed. Okay? You cannot say, oh, that's the way I write everything in capital. No, it's very important because C and O in chemistry has 2 meanings. It can be cobalt or it can be carbon monoxide. So the information that the chemical formula has, for every 1 carbon atom, there's a corresponding molecule, corresponding oxygen atom to give you the carbon monoxide molecule. So terms that we need to remember here molecular substance. Okay, so what do we say about this molecular substance? So the definition that's put there is made up of molecule, and molecule is a definite group of atoms that are chemically bonded together, that is tightly connected by attractive force. Okay, so you have a molecular substance if it is, okay, composed of molecules, all of which are alike. Okay, and the way that you write a molecular substance, you write it in terms of molecular formula, and it gives you the exact number of atoms of elements in a given molecule. Now, how they are arranged, you call it the structural formula. So this shows how the atoms are bonded in to one another in a given molecule. So to give you how the molecular formula and structural formula are different, so maybe this slide can tell you clearly. So if you have molecular formula, it's just giving you how many atoms are there in a given molecule. But if you have a structural formula, it shows you how the atoms are arranged with one another. You can form it like this one, or you can have a model. You can have a ball stick model like this, or a space filling type like this one. Now, what's the other thing that we need to know about molecular formula if we're going to get the information that we have from the periodic table? So usually if you have molecular formula or molecular substance, they have the so-called covalent bond. You will learn about this covalent bond as we go on. Okay, just to give you what the covalent bond means, it consists of non-metal and another non-metal. Like this one, oxygen and hydrogen, both of them are non-metals. So it is a molecular substance. Okay, nitrogen and hydrogen, both of them are non-metals. So this is, again, a molecular substance. And then you have carbon, oxygen, and hydrogen. All of them are non-metals. So you have molecular substance. Okay, this is going to be very important when we go to naming. Now, if you have a molecular substance, there is also a group that is known as ionic substances. Okay, although many substances are what we say molecular, others are composed of these ions. Okay, how do we define ions? They are anything that has charge. Okay, so you can have the term cation and anion. So this is what? Positively charged, and this is negatively charged. So an ion is an electrically charged particle. So how do they become electrically charged? Either they lost or gain electron. So if an element lost an electron, what happened? Will it become positive or negatively charged?
Positive.
Okay, so you lost a negative, so you become positive. So if you gain a negative, you become a negatively charged ion. So that's how we define ion. Okay, now NaCl is a substance that is made up of ion. So if you're going to break down, so the electron from the sodium was lost and it was gained by the chlorine. So you have here a positive and a negatively charged. So you have here an ionic substance. Now, what can you say about sodium? Is it a metal, non-metal, or semi-metal?
Metal.
If you're going to look at the periodic table, it is a metal, non-metal, or semi-metal?
Metal.
Okay, it's a metal. And chlorine is non-metal. Okay, so what does this mean? If you have an ionic substances, usually it's made up of a metal and a non-metal. So the next slide tells you what I have mentioned about ionic substances. So when an atom picks up electron, it becomes negatively charged. So we call it an ion. If an atom loses electrons, it becomes a positively charged and you have a cation. So we could say an ionic substance is just made up of cations and anions. So if we're going to look at this is how it looks like. So this is your sodium. It lost the electron. Okay. So it becomes positively charged. So what happened? That electron is given to chlorine. So from 11 electron, it now becomes 10 electrons. So that means it becomes positive. Okay. Because you lost now one of the negative side. Now, the electron that was lost, it will be gained by fluorine. It becomes from 9 electrons, becomes 10 electrons. So you have there an excess of 1 electron. So it becomes negatively charged. And if you want to see how they are arranged, so usually, okay, one of them here is a sodium ion and the other one is a chloride, and they form some sort of a network. And the ratio that they have, that's the one that we have as the ionic substances. So the ionic substances that we have the formula. We don't call it ionic formula. It's just formula. Okay. So the formula of an ionic compound is written by given the smallest possible whole number ratio of different ions in a given substance. And the formula unit of the substance is the group of atoms or ions that's explicitly symbolized by its formula. So we don't call it molecules. Okay, it's the term that they have is a formula unit. Now, what's the given takeaway here? Molecular substances, non-metal and non-metal, ionic substances, non-metal and metal. Because it's very important for you to identify what's a given substance. There is a different rule if you have an ionic compound and molecular compound or molecular substance. So I'm going to use here the other slide that I have. This is still in your Blackboard. So again, just a review, this is a periodic table. So these are the common group that we have here. So we know that this, whatever color is this one, these are your metals. This one here, including the hydrogen, that's your non-metals. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at what's the rule in naming substances or naming compound and writing chemical formula. So this is the main summary of what we're going to do today. So the first question that you're going to ask, what type of compound it is? Now you might say, oh, we are able to determine the ionic substance or ionic compound, but what's covalent one that we have here? That's just a molecular compound. Okay, because you have covalent bonding that holds the non-metals together. Okay, and there's another one that we have here, which is the acid. So this is a special case that we will go on. So as we recall, ionic compound, cations and anions. Now, most of the cations are the metals, but there is also the so-called polyatomic ions. So from the name polyatomic, so they are ions that contain more than one element. Okay, a polyatomic ion is an ion consisting of 2 or more atoms chemically bonded together and carry a net electric charge. Okay? And your anions can also be a nonmetals or a polyatomic ions. So those are the ionic compounds. So it could be a nonmetal plus metal, or you can have a metal plus the polyatomic ions, that is a negatively charged because your metal is positive, or you have a polyatomic charge that is positive plus a nonmetal. So those are the ionic compound. And usually there are two types of them that we're going to discuss.
I have a question.
Okay.
Can an ionic compound be a metal and a metal? Does it always...
Usually that's the strict definition. But we have these polyatomic ions also that can combine with either a metal or a non-metal to give you ionic compound.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so we're going to go on each of these items that we have. So the first question that you need to answer is, what type of compound is it? So once you see that you have a metal and a non-metal, or maybe some polyatomic ions, so that's right away an ionic compound. But if you don't see that, okay, you don't see an anion, you don't see a cation, so that means you just see all non-metals. So you could say that is a molecular substance. The acid, I'm going to tell you the difference of the acid is usually there's an H. Okay, an H plus, that when you combine either with another element to give you the binary acids, or the oxo acids, which makes up of oxygen containing group. Okay, that's a polyatomic ion. So you have there either a binary acid or an oxy acid. So an ion does not contain oxygen, an ion contains oxygen. So we're going to go in each of them one by one. Okay? So let's go with the ionic. So the first thing that I ask you to do is determine whether or not the compound is ionic. So all you need to do is to look for charges. Is there a positive charge? If there's a positive charge, most likely there's a negative charge. So how do you know the compound is ionic in the first place? First, it has a metal. So most likely it is an ionic compound. Okay? Now, if it doesn't have a metal, what do you have? You have a positive polyatomic ions. Unfortunately, there's only one. That is polyatomic ions that's positively charged. And that is your, what do you call this? Anyone?
Ammonia.
Okay, that is ammonium. Ammonia is NH3. So you have there an additional positive charge. So we call it ammonium ion. So that's the name that you have there. So it is the only positive polyatomic ion.
Do we have to memorize the others?
Huh?
Do we have to memorize the other polyatomic ions?
Not really. The common one only. Okay? And the next thing that you're going to do, once you see that, oh, you have a positive charge, you determine whether there's only one type of cation possible, and those are what we say the type 1, or if there are several cations that are possible, and that is type 2. Okay? So usually, if you have a polyatomic ion, the charge is always 1. They only have one charge, polyatomic ion. And usually that is what is given. Okay, unless, okay, you have what we say PO4 minus, PO3, or PO4 3 minus, PO3 3 minus, so that is a different thing. Okay. Now, if the cation is metal, usually if you have the representative group, they only have one charge. So they are what we call type 1. It's the transition metals that is the more problematic. they can have more than one type of cation. So what does this mean? Okay. There are some metals in the B group that can exist in more than one charge. But we focus first on the type 1. So when we say type 1, the cation of the given metal has only one charge. Like group 1A, all of them positive 1. Group 2A, all of them positive 2. Okay? So when that happens, if we have the type 1, we name the cation first and then the anion is named second. And we maintain the name of the cation as it is. So if you have magnesium, it will remain as magnesium. But the anion, we're going to change. Okay? We drop some of the letters in the name and we add the suffix IDE. So for this one, how are we going to name this? How are we going to name this one?
Magnesium fluoride.
So that is magnesium fluoride. So as you could see, the cation remains magnesium, but the anion from fluorine, it becomes, we drop that one, replace it with IDE, so it becomes fluoride.
And this is the rule for naming all types of compounds or just a type 1 compound?
These are the type 1 compound that contains one charge. We're not
Okay.
done with type 2 yet.
So
Okay?
if one charge, it keeps the first element's full name and the second
Yep.
element the ide.
Yep. Now, how about if the combination involves a polyatomic ion? So as I've told you, the only positive polyatomic ion is ammonium. So that means you're going to use the whole thing. Okay? So if you have a polyatomic ion, so this resembles molecules in that they contain at least 2 atoms bound together in a definite arrangement. So the rule that we have there, the cation is listed first and the anion is second. So as much as possible, name the, you have to know the common polyatomic ion. There's no extra prefixes or suffixes. So that means whatever the name of the polyatomic ion, you use it as it is. Okay? So these are just some of the polyatomic ions. So if you're going to look at this, okay, so you can have a pair root 8. So whatever is the root word here, you just use that. So this one, the root word is chlorate, chlor. So you can call it perchlorate. If it's less than 1 oxygen, that would be chlorate. If it's only 2 oxygen, then it is chloride. And if it's only 1 oxygen, it is hypochlorite. Okay, so the common that we have here is the phosphate, the nitrate. So the nitrate, they only have 2, either what? Nitrate or nitrite. So see the difference? So NO3 minus, that's nitrate. NO2 minus, that is nitrite. Okay.
Will not all the polyatomics have more than one? Like I don't know. Some of them don't have the ites.
Yeah, as shown here. Look at the here. XXX. That means it's missing.
Okay, so that doesn't mean we have to find. It just doesn't exist.
No, yeah, it doesn't exist.
Okay.
Okay. Now we have a special rule when we have the halogen later on. Why this has 4, but the naming that I have would still follow. The 8 is higher than the I. Does that make sense?
Yes.
All 8 are higher than the I. What is lower than the I? The hypo, whatever the root word, I. What is what we call higher than the 8? Per. Now I so if we're going to look at back here, as I've told you, the 8 is higher than the I. What is lower than the I? The hypo, whatever the root word I. What is higher than the 8? This is really hyper. Okay? Root word 8. So that means hyper, right? Hyper is too much. Hypo is too little. So how are we going to look at this? Okay? So for instance, if we're given this formula, how are we going to name this? So we just maintain everything. There's no suffix or prefix. So we have this what? K is potassium. And what is NO3? So if we're going to look at this, this is really K plus and this is NO3 minus. So NO3 minus is nitrate. So if I'm going to give you this one, how are you going to name it? CaSO4. Anyone?
Calcium sulfate.
So it is calcium sulfate. So if you're going to break them down, it's Ca2 plus and SO4 2 minus. And if you're going to look at this, it's here. The SO4 and the SO3. Okay? So that's the type 1. Now when does type 2 comes in? So type 2 comes in if you have more than one charge, like Fe. Fe can exist as 2 plus or 3 plus. Now, you may ask, is there a rule on their charge? The answer is yes. So if you're going to the periodic table, the one that we started here, so all group 1, they would form +1. All group 2, they would form +2. All group 3 around +3. And this one, all group 7. So 7 minus 8 will give you what? Anyone?
1.
7 minus 8 will give you -1. 6 minus 8 will give you -2. So those are the possible charges that form. Now, why do you need to know this? Okay, you need to know this because they will be your guide to determine what's the charges, especially of this problematic transition element. They will be the one to tell you what will be the charge. So if we're going to look at here, so what is the Fe charge here? So what is O? If you're going to break them down.
2.
So Fe and O. So what is the charge usually of O?
-2.
So it's -2. So what could be the charge of your Fe here to give you FeO?
+2.
+2. Now you may ask, how do we know that? Because usually what happened to the charge that you have here, you're just going to what? Add them together. And if they cancel out, so that means you just need 1 Fe for every 1 oxygen. And if you're going to name it, how are you going to name it? So iron, and then whatever the charge, you put the numeral number. And what is oxygen as an ion? Anyone?
Oxide.
Okay, so you name it as iron 2 oxide. Now you might say, Professor, why do we need to put the Roman numeral 2? Because as I told you, iron can exist as +2 or +3.
So iron always carries a charge of +2.
or 3.
Or 3. So
Yeah,
oxygen carries the -2 all the time.
always. If it
Okay.
becomes an anion. That's why they're the one who will guide you to determine what's the charge of those elements that is more than one positive charge.
The oxygen.
I have a
Okay.
question. What's the quickest way to like memorize the charge of each of the elements, like so for naming them?
Here. So you see group 1, +1, group 2, +2, group 3, +3. Now when you go 6 and 7, how do I get the -2 and the -1? I subtract it with 8. See that one? 6 minus 8 will give me -2. 7 minus 8 will give me -1.
Okay,
Here,
thank you.
there's no way. There's no rule. At least the representative fine, but the transition, as I told you, the problematic transition method. Because some of them, they exist, they have more than one, what we call charge. Later on, you could say it's oxidation number. The only one that has one charge, I think there is silver. Silver is always +1. But you go to the copper, copper exists as +1 and +2.
So do all of the transition metals have or become type 2 compounds then?
I told you, if you have a transition metal, the one that will help you determine what the charge is, whatever an ion that is attached to it.
I have a question. In group 4, and could it be +4 and -4? And how do we
Yep.
tell the difference?
Well, it depends on the what we call the other element that you have there. Because you have this later on, like this one. So how will I know which lead ions do I have? Which will guide me to predict the charge of the lead?
I mean, the chlorine.
The chlorine. So what's the charge of the chlorine? Anyone? What's the charge of the chloride?
-1.
It's a -1. So what do you do? So -1 times 2. So that means this is
+2.
+2. Because what will happen if you have charges, when you add all charge together, it should give you the charge of the compound. So in this case, +2 plus 2 times -1 will give you what?
-2.
+2 plus -2, that will give you
0.
0.
0. Where did I get the -2? -1 times 2. Get it?
Yes.
Now, how about this? What's the charge of your PB?
+4.
+4.
So that's +4. Because this one is always -1, so you multiply it by 4. So you have a -4. So what makes -4 0? A +4. So how do I name this one? So I can name this as what? Lead 2 oxide. And this one is lead 4 oxide. Now, how do we get this one? How do we determine the charge of the Fe here in the, this is an iron oxide, but which iron oxide? Because we already know the other one, the iron 2 oxide. So what's the charge of your oxygen?
3.
-2.
What's the
-2.
charge of the -2? Okay, so
What is the number at the bottom for? Or is it how many oxygens there are?
which one? At the
For-
bottom, yeah, it's how many oxygen you have there.
Oh, so it's not the charges, it's how many there are. Okay.
The charges is you're the one you're going to determine it.
Yes.
Okay, so if it's a -2, so you multiply this with 3, that will give you what?
-6.
-6. So what number that you're going to multiply with 2 when you add with -6 gives you 0?
Well, isn't it the charge of 2? Or that was the Fe, doesn't it have a charge of +2?
It has a +2 for this.
Mm-hmm.
But what did I tell you? There's another charge of the Fe, not
Oh,
only
3.
+2.
2 or 3.
Okay?
Yeah. How do you know the difference then? Like, when do you...
Well, that's why I told you. How do you know the difference? The oxygen will tell you.
Oh, yeah, you did say that.
Okay?
Yeah.
So the one that will tell you what's the charge of your metal that has more than one charge is the anion that you have there.
Okay.
Okay? We did it here in the lead. So we're just trying to obtain this one. So this is just iron 3 oxide.
Okay. Okay, I kind of get it now.
Okay? Now,
Yes.
there's another way to do that, but I would just suggest you concentrate on the Roman numeral. You can use the us and the ik. So this one is your ferrous oxide, and this one is your ferric oxide. Okay? So usually you use also here the old Latin name that you have. Now for the chlorine, chlorine is always -1 when it becomes charged. Okay? It's not +1, it's always -1. If you have chlorine, what happened? Okay, there's an electron that you gain, it becomes chlorine -1. It cannot be iron 6 oxide. Why? Because we're looking at the charge of the Fe. Okay? So if you're going to look at some of the common transition metal that has more than one, these are some of them. Manganese, they even have, I think, 5 when we go to the oxidation number. So for simplicity, we're just going to use the IUPAC one, wherein you use the Roman numeral number. So if you're going to go to the gold, so you have here what? Gold 1 and gold 2. So you have Aurus and Auric. I don't know if you have watched James Bond. There's a villain that's named like this. Auric Goldfinger. So his first name and last name are both gold. And the story of the movie is about what? Gold. Okay, so these are just what we call some of the transition metals that has more than one charge. So which one tells you what the charge they have? You have to look at the anion, because usually the anion, they only have one charge. Okay, so that's the type 2. Now let's try to name some of them here. How do you name BaO? Anyone?
Barium oxide?
It's barium oxide. So if you're going to break it down, how they form, there's a Ba2 plus because barium is group 2A, and oxygen, which always have 2 minus. Now, how about this one? So try to look if chromium has more than one thing. Since chromium has more than one thing, so it's either 2 or 3. So how are we going to name this?
Chromium sulfide.
Chromium, what oxidation number? And this is what? Sul? SO4 is what? Sulfide? Sulfate?
Sulfate.
Sulfate. Now the question now is, how do we identify or how do we determine the charge of the chromium? Okay, so what is the guide? The guide will be what is the thing that we'll get from here.
Is it -2?
So what is SO4 charge? If we're going to look at the SO4, what's the charge of SO4?
-2.
-2. So how many 2 minus do we have here? So the whole sulfate is in close and open and close parentheses. So that means you multiply this with this one, giving you a negative number of
-8.
2 times 3?
6.
6. So what are we going to do now? So I need a charge that when I multiply with this one, and when I add the answer to -6 will give me 0.
It's 3.
So this is plus 3. And this now become like that. Analyze. Before I gave the full question.
So I get the PR part, like I get that, the part because we're using the 3 at the end. What I didn't get was the SO4 part because I thought
you consider this as one whole. What is SO4 charge as a whole? It's 2.
Yes.
Minus.
But do we need to multiply it by the 4 or was
No.
Okay.
Because the -2 there is for the whole SO4.
Oh, and the 4 is just for the oxygen.
Okay.
Okay. So that's why it's in parentheses. Okay. I'm glad I asked about that.
Now let's go another one. Here. How do we name them?
K2
K2
CO3. Yeah.
CO3. Potassium carbonate. So if you're going to look at this, K would have what charge? As an cation, K plus, right? And then carbonate is a polyatomic ion that is CO3 2 minus. So how do we balance the positive and the negative charge? You need 2 of K plus. So that's why what we're going to do here is we put it like this. Or usually the way that they do, for simplicity, whatever's the charge, you swap. So you put this here, and this one, you put this here. So since it's only one, you don't need to put the open and close parentheses. Okay? Manganese sulfate. So if you break it down, you have what? Mn. What's the charge of Mn? Anyone?
1.
2.
2.
2 plus.
2. Because it says there Roman numeral 2. Now sulfate is SO4 2 minus. So how are we going to write the formula for this?
So do you like
Would it just be MnSO4?
Yep. So they have the same. So you just combine them. Because it's understood that they have the same. There's a 1-to-1 ratio.
Okay.
Wait, I have a question. How is it
Sure.
2 plus?
Huh?
Is it plus 2 or whatever? 2
Because
plus.
you have there the Roman numeral number
Okay.
that represent the charge.
Okay.
Okay?
Okay,
Now,
so thanks.
what if we have the other one? What if we have the so-called covalent compounds? So how are we going to name it? Okay? So if we have the covalent compound, so this is what we call, all of them is made up of nonmetals. So compound contains only nonmetals. So you can sure that it is a covalent compound. The only exceptions that we have is this one. How do we name this? We follow whatever the name that we have there. So NH4, that's ammonium, NH4 plus, and Br minus. So that's bromide. And then this one, how do we name this?
Ammonium sulfate.
Ammonium and sulfate. So we cannot say this is what we call the covalent compound. These still follow the rules that we have for the ionic compound because they have a positive and a negative charge. Okay? So what's the rule that we have here that is different from the ionic compound? So the first element in the compound is still named using the first element. Now the second element is named as though it were on the anion. We still use the IDE for the second element. But there's a difference. The use of prefixes. So binary covalent compound or covalent compound or molecular compounds, that's the only one that's used prefixes. Okay?
Are
So
these
when,
the very weak connection?
no, it has nothing to do with the connection because this is covalent compound. The other one's ionic compound. It's just made up of all nonmetals.
Yes.
Okay? So these are the common prefix. Okay? So the way that you name them is the prefix, full name of the nonmetal, and then the prefix and the nonmetal root, and add the IDE. So how are you going to name this one? P4O6. How do you name P4O6? So what do you have there? Phosphorus and
Oxygen.
an oxide. So what's missing? The prefix. So how many phosphorus do you have there? 4. So you have the tetra phosphorus, and you have 6. So that's hexa. So that's the name, phosphorus hexaoxide. Okay? Let's try here. How do we name this?
The first one is oxygen difluoride.
So oxygen difluoride. Very good. This one.
Tetrasulfate. Tetra.
Tetrasulfate. So what is S?
I thought it was sulfur.
So tetrasulfur. And tetra. So how do we name this one?
Nitrite.
It has to name in AIDE. So the root word is nitro, nitrogen, nitro. At least the spelling of the nitrogen is there.
So
How about the
will
last one? Okay, yes.
will the second one always end in IED
Yes, that's
for
the
the
rule.
type ones?
The first one, you always what we call maintain the full name.
Okay.
How do we name the last one?
Boron trichloride.
Boron trichloride.
So it's a boron trichloride. Okay, now how about the other one? If we do it the other way. So how do we write the formula before I give you the full question about
C
the previous one? So this is,
CS2.
huh?
CS2.
CS2, okay? Second one,
N B
3.
3. Yeah. N2 F3.
N2F4.
Three. Four.
N2F4.
4. Now, you might say, if it's the first letter, we don't use the mono if it's only one. It's understood. Okay?
Yes.
Because you might say, why can't we name it monocarbon disulfide? If it's the first element and if it's only one, it's okay not to include the prefix mono. Okay? So get ready. So this question is from previous class. So I'm going to give you 1 minute. Starts now. Can you mute? "15 seconds. You don't see the question, it's showing.
It's not showing on mine.
I don't know why. Okay. What's the answer? Anyone? Which of the following is our true or what we call postulates of the Dalton's atomic theory?
Was it
First-
2, 3?
First statement is atoms of each element have different properties. Is that true?
No.
Yes. Okay. Number 2, elements occur as solid, liquid, or gases. That's not included in the postulates. And number 3, atoms combine in fixed ratio of whole numbers. That's true. So the answer here is 1 and 3. So only 26%. If we're going to, if I look at to show you the answer, this is the answer that you have. Okay. So
Yeah, because elements don't.
let's look at the last one. So I don't know why you cannot see the full question.
If you, it's like it depends on like the device you have. It'll just
So
pop,
if-
or you
if
have
you-
to, or you have to
Yeah,
click.
if you have iPad, I'm not sure how it is.
Yeah.
Just for future purposes, who was the person that proposed that elements occur as solids, liquids, or gases?
No, it wasn't proposed by Dalton. That's all I know. It's not included in the postulates. Okay, so the answer is 1 and 3. Now, let's go with the last one in the naming, the acids. So acids is anything that gives off H+. So for one to have an acid, the H should be included. And usually they said an acid is made up of H plus and an anion, or an acid is made up of an H with the polyatomic anion. Okay, so there are 2 types of acids. I'm going to simplify the one that we have here. the one that we know as the binary acid. So it's just HNX. So usually you write it like that one. And the so-called oxoacid. So it's made up of an H plus another element and an oxygen. So that's the difference of the acids that we have. Now, what's the what we call rule that we have here? So if we have an acid like HCl, we don't name it as what? Hydrogen chloride. If we follow what we have learned so far, HCl can be named as hydrogen chloride. But we don't follow that thing. Why? Because we have here an H, which means that when they dissociate, it will form an acid. So instead of using hydrogen chloride, we have this rule wherein we use the word hydro, and then root, and then IC, and then what? The name acid. Okay? So you don't name HCl as hydrogen chloride or HI as hydrogen iodide. You name it as hydrochloric acid or hydroiodic acid. So you have there the hydro, and then the root word of the nonmetal, and then IC, and then the word acid. And some examples of these are the one listed here. So for those so-called binary acid. So hydrochloric acid, hydrobromic, hydroiodic, and then hydrocyanic, hydrosulfuric, and hydrozoic acid. Okay, now what if we have the oxygen? So now we have the so-called oxo acid. So some of the common one we have here, what? Carbonic acid, salicylic acid. But what if we have like this one, the halogens? So the halogens follow this rule. Okay, so all you need to do is what? Add a hydrogen here. So this polyatomic ion, you can call it hypochlorite. Another oxygen, that's chloride. Another oxygen, that's chlorate. Another oxygen, that's perchlorate. So when you add the hydrogen to it, so you follow now the rule hypochlorous acid, hydrochlorous acid, chloric acid, and perchloric acid. Now the question is, how do we know it will be an OOS or an IC? Well, here, look what's common here. If it's an I, it will become OOS. If it's an 8, it will become IC. Okay? So let's try to see how do we answer the formula here, given the name and given the formula, how are we going to name them? So how do you name this periodic acid, or if you follow the thing, it's periodic acid? How are you going to write the formula for this?
H5.
How many O?
6.
Is it 6?
No.
Anyone? Because if you're going to look at this, until how many O do we have? We only have 4 as the highest number of O. So
4.
This is HiO4. Now, how do we name this? Hydrogen and sulfite. So this is, anyone?
Sulfurous acid, right? Yeah.
Sulfurous acid. Very good. How about nitrous acid? Anyone?
HNO2.
HNO2. Yes. If it's HNO3, that's nitric acid. Now, how about this? What do you call this?
Carbonic acid.
So it's carbonic acid. Okay?
How come it's periodic acid?
The what?
The first one, the prefix per.
It's per, and then the IO as the what we call root word, and then the IC.
That's some chips.
And what is
Okay.
per necessarily? Is that also like?
So that's one of the what we call prefix here.
Thank you.
Professor, isn't
Yep.
it at the second one? Isn't it sulfuric acid?
No, sulfuric is H2SO4. Sulfate is what we call like this one. And SO3 is
Leaving you.
sulfite. Please mute the one that has a background noise.
I want to hear it.
Okay?
Can I see the previous slide?
Yep.
Thank you.
Someone's toy.
Hey, please mute, okay? Or I'm going to force to mute everyone.
I apologize.
So I would suggest you go over this lecture and practice. Okay? Maybe you can practice the one that is in the main slide, some of the naming that we have there. So the polyatomic ions, the common one. So I still have some what we call materials that I have here. So if you have the covalent compound or molecular substances, so there are some examples that you have here. And then the acids that we have here, okay? And in some cases, we have the so-called hydrates. So this is the one that contains water, like this one. So the way that we do it is copper sulfate and then put there whatever the number, penta, and then H2O hydrate. Okay, so copper sulfate, penta, hydrate. And then the next thing that we're going to do now that we have here, maybe for the next 2 minutes, is we now have the chemical formula. So we build up already from atom, it becomes a molecule. So what do we do now? We're going to react one molecule with another molecule to produce another substances. So we have this chemical equation. So we're building up now. So atoms, when atoms, you have a molecule, so you can react an atom with a molecule to produce new substances. So you have here this chemical equation. So if we have a chemical equation, okay, it's just a symbolic representation of the chemical reaction in terms of chemical formula. So in a chemical equation, what do you have? You have here the reactants, and on the other side, the products. So you have here the reaction of sodium with chlorine to produce sodium chloride. Okay. Now, what did you notice in a chemical equation? If you're going to look at the element on both sides, Na and Cl, so if you're going to count how many Na do you have here? So you have 2 chlorine. You also have what we call, maybe the way I'm going to do it like this, reactant product. So you have 2 chlorine, also 2, and then in the product 2 times Na, 2 times Cl, you have 2. Okay. you have here a balanced chemical equation. So the way that you're going to have here, so this is your reactants and this is your products. And in between them is what? As the name of the bond, one direction arrow. Okay? Now, the thing that I'm telling you, you have to make sure that the number of elements on both sides are also the same, because you have to make them balance. Okay? So before I go this one, so how do we make sure it is balanced? The number of elements on both sides are the same. So this is following the law of conservation of mass. So the law of conservation of mass dictates that the number of elements at the beginning of the reaction is the same after the reaction. So for instance here, so you have here H4. So there's one missing here. That should be CH4. Yes, there's no such thing as H4. So if you're going to look at this, how many elements do you have? Carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. Okay. So reactant side, so if you already balance that one, carbon is only what? One. Hydrogen, how many hydrogen do you have in the reactant side?
4.
Okay. You have 4. And oxygen, you have
2.
4.
Oh,
4. 2 times 2. And then on the product side, you have carbon, how many? 1. Oxygen, 2 here, times 2 here, or plus 2 here.
4.
So that's 4. The same thing with hydrogen.
4.
Okay, so that means the reaction is now balanced. So as I told you, the one that dictates this is the law of conservation of mass. So it dictates that the total number of atoms of each element on both sides of a chemical equation must be matched. And that thing, we could say it is balanced. So usually what happens? You will be given a chemical equation. And the first thing for you to do is to make sure it is balanced. Okay, so how do you balance it? By just changing the number in front of the given substances. It's not the subscript here, okay? It's the coefficient in front of them. So it's a trial and error reaction. So consider the combustion of methane with oxygen to produce carbon dioxide and water. So if we follow the thing earlier, maybe we do this and then we stop. So we start with what? Whatever we have here. Carbon is 1, hydrogen is 4, oxygen is 2, carbon is 1, oxygen is 3, and hydrogen is 2. So you start first with the more complicated one. So what is the one that is more complicated? Hydrogen. Okay, so this is 4 here and this is 2. So you don't need to adjust anything here, but you can adjust this one. So how to make this 4? Maybe you multiply this by 2 or put 2 here. So 2 times 2, this now becomes 4. Now by putting 2 here, what happened to the oxygen? It becomes also 4. 2 times 1 here plus 2, so it's 4. But as you could see, the oxygen is only what we call alone here, so you can always adjust this one by adding 2 as a subscript. So those are one that you don't write, it's understood to have what? 1, but you don't need to write the number 1, it's understood. Because if it's 0, it's not there in the first place. Okay? That's what we call balancing. Now, I'm going to leave you this one, and then maybe at the beginning of the lecture next meeting, we're going to finish this thing here, and then we're going to proceed with chapter 3. And I want you to prepare your calculator. Okay? Although I think I still have some question here that we can go on maybe for the next 2 minutes before we have an open forum. That's the one that you're going to work on next week. Oh, I think I don't have any because I already prepared. So the quote of the day that I have, that's the one that I forgot to do. So for the quote of the day, before I open the thing to everyone, is this. A slight difference can mean a lot. So if you have it like this, 1.00 raised to 365, that's always 1. But 1.01 raised to 365, why do you say 365? That's 365 days. Will give you 37.7. So doing nothing at all versus a small consistent effort. So what's this small consistent effort? Your quiz. Okay? You know your quiz is not going to what we call really included in the periodic table, in your what we call the grade, unless what?
Unless our test score is very low.
You have a test score that is very low. And the reason why I asked you to take the quiz is at least you're going to be familiar, okay, on how the exam would look like and how Respondus lockdown work. And usually some of the questions that come out on the quiz may also come out during the exam. So this is a win-win situation for you. For me, I just need to do additional part. I just need to prepare that thing. So question now, those that are asking question.
I don't know why I seem to be confused with the per, because it's only per chloride. Like,
No, the per is for those that has 4 oxygen.
Oh,
per
4 oxygen.
From hyper.
And
okay?
Okay.
Hypo is usually low, hyper is high. So the highest number of oxygen in an oxo acid is 4. Although there's an SO8, but we're not going to include that thing.
Okay, and how come in the table of ions, it's not named like that?
No, you don't include that one because that is only applicable if you have an oxo acid.
Okay, thank you. I was just so confused with that.
Question?
Professor, the quiz is due Thursday?
Until Thursday, yep.
Okay, thank you.
I had a question about the OWL. So
okay.
Does retrying the entire group affect our grade?
What? Pardon again?
It's like when you get one wrong, like you have to retry the whole group to like get new questions to get them right. And it gives you a certain amount of attempts. It only gives you like, takes off points if you go through all the attempts.
I think it gives you 10 attempts, right?
It gives you, yeah, it gives you 10.
Yeah, when you go to Orgo, I think you only have 1 attempt there.
Okay, thank you.
So I cannot go over than that. And usually in each attempt, it will, I think, change the number. I'm not sure because I never go as a student there, but I think whenever I open the thing, they change the number, but the concept is still there. Remember, why did I, when I presented the Zoom video on how to answer the, what we call the out question, I didn't put there the answer. Because the answer is not important for me because you're going to have different numbers. What's important to me is how you solve the problem.
I also have another question.
Okay.
But it's regarding an actual question about the quiz. So could I ask it or do I wait?
Sure, you can ask it now.
So for one of the questions, it was about density.
Okay.
And it asked if an object floats in water, it is less dense than water.
Yeah.
And I put like that was right, but it was wrong. And
I'm not sure. I have to check that because what will happen if I'm wrong, I'm just going to what we say, correct the thing, and then everything will be corrected. Don't worry, I usually check them up at the end.
Oh, one of the questions was like
Hey,
about.
you're asking questions. Some of their classmates has not taken the quiz yet.
Oh, okay.
It's up to you. You can private message me on that if you. Because
Okay.
if you ask the question, those who have not taken yet, I think only 30 students just took it. So you're given the chance to answer it correctly. You can private message on me on that, okay?
For today's Zoom recording, will you be able to put it up before Thursday so we can look back at it for the quiz and everything like that?
No, I mean, all recording are up.
Okay.
Okay, I mean, after this is done, what I do is I wait for the cloud to send me the number or the whatever link, and then what I do, I post that link to the Blackboard. So all recordings that we have are, I make it available before the end of the day. So you should be able to get there. If I'm not mistaken, the title of that is in Zoom session, I think. So if you have the documents, so there's a folder there that says Zoom sessions. So I'm going to share to you the Zoom sessions that you have there. So that one. So that Zoom session, when you open it, you see there. Oh, I forgot that September 3. Okay. Yes, September 3. Okay, I'm going to put it. I'm going to upload it there. So you're going to put it here. Maybe okay.
Hi, so I have a question. So the next assessment is on OWL, right?
No, I mean all the assessment that you have here, okay, are the quizzes. The OWL is all usually the long assignment that you have.
Mm-hmm. So what's due Thursday?
No, I don't think so.
Thursday?
Yeah, usually I give you a time. This due is on Thursday.
Oh, the chapter 1 quiz?
Yeah. But the OWL due is today.
Yeah, that's what that's done. I'm talking about I thought the other one, this chapter 2 was due on Thursday. Not
so no, not yet. I think chapter 2, no.
Okay.
Because we're not done yet.
Just to clarify.
Usually a week after. So we're not done with chapter 2 yet.
Okay, good. Thank you.
So the chapter 1 quiz, you can only access it through Respondus. Okay? So if you don't use Respondus, you cannot access it. So any more questions before we call it a day?
Mr. Mojika, I feel like I had a huge amnesia shock just then. But can you verify if I'm part of your class in OWL in the K Senjin thing? Because for some reason I tried entering a lot of times, and I'm like, am I just like going local thinking I have it placed already?
Well, if you follow the direction there.
It's been a long time. It's been a long time. That's why and then I ended up buying more stuff into my computer. So then now I'm just like second guessing myself.
Okay. Shoot me an email on that, so I can at least.
Okay.
Any more questions? Okay. So if none, stay safe. See you on Thursday.
Have a good one. Thank you.
Have a good one.
Have a good one.
Bye.
Bye.